winter break, I went skiing in northeastern Italy, and I spent the last 2 days in Venice. First of all, I just want to mention the stuff around Venice. There's a couple cool towns which you probably want to see, like Verona, I think, is around there, and Padua, which I also visited, and like I said, I went skiing in the very pretty Dolomites. Like, seriously, go there. No. I'm going to be talking about 3 things in Venice. The Doge's Palace, St. Mark's Basilica/Cathedral, and Venice itself. Now, first of all, St. Mark's Square is this square which is overlooked by St. Mark's Basilica, which is also the local cathedral. And then just nearby, like literally attached to the cathedral, is the Doge's Palace, where all the ancient Venetian government was running. First off, the Doge's Palace. Now, like I said, the Doge's Palace was the place for all of the Venetian government services. And they had a republic during that time, so they had a lot of really, really crazy, like, political organs and stuff. Like, they had councils of 40, and they had 3 of those. They had councils of 10. They had the Grand Council. They had the Doge himself, who was basically a duke, except elected. And they had the Senate, and they had, like, the full council, too. So it was just really, really complicated. Now, the Doge's Palace is this basically big pink square surrounding a courtyard. And once you get to the government sort of compartments, every single square inch of the wall is like wallpapered with masterpieces, with people like Veronese. In fact, most of the paintings are by Veronese. The only problem with it is that it's just much too overwhelming. Like, if I were to look at a building today, like here at home after a day home from school, for example, I think that would be very, very pretty, but after seeing like all of those paintings and stuff, I just kind of got overwhelmed with the Doge's Palace. Second of all, St. Mark's Basilica/Cathedral. I'm going to refer to it as a cathedral because it just sounds better for me. St. Mark's Cathedral is, as my dad calls it, a typical Byzantine church. It's built like that, the frescoes are in that style, i.e. painted poorly, no offense. And also with a bunch of stuff that they looted from Constantinople. All of this sort of stems from the fact that from the 13th century and before that, Venice traded with Constantinople and provided the rest of Europe with all of its goods and stuff, and that's sort of how it became powerful. And then from 1204 to 1261, I believe, Venice basically ruled Constantinople and sacked it and basically occupied it as a foreign colony, and they bought off a bunch of stuff from there. One of the things which they did bring over from before that time, from Muslim lands, was St. Mark's body. They have 3 museums, but I just want to talk about St. Mark's, like, actual interior, which I found the most fascinating and just really interesting. In Byzantine churches, the first third is very square and rectangular and gray, kind of like a court, whereas the rest of the upper 2/3 is very domed and gold and glittery. When you look at the top of St. Mark's, it also looks as though like it's been graffitied with frescoes. It just kind of looked like someone just went up there and spray painted it. In the center dome, which I found quite interesting, is Jesus. And he's wearing like a blue robe with stars on it. And he's writing, while blessing the universe, on nothing other than a rainbow. Rainbows. But anyway, he's blessing the world, and there's the apostles and Mary around him, and everything sort of stems from him. So I thought that was an interesting little interaction, like, stemming from the centers, because generally frescoes are just isolated from each other and they don't have anything to do with each other at all. Third of all, Venice itself. When I mean Venice itself, I just mean the streets and such, and like the narrow little pathways. Venice is very, very special. I haven't really mentioned it in this video yet, but I really, really liked Venice because of its streets. Like, as you can sort of tell, it's very, very narrow, all the buildings are really old and clustered together, and it's very romantic and whatnot, but it's just, I like it. I don't know, like, you could be walking one direction and the next minute you've turned 90 degrees and you don't even know it till a half an hour later. I find that pretty cool. Also, there's no cars. It's like a big shopping mall. So it's just fun to sort of like walk around, and sometimes you have streets which are shorter than your arm span, and you sometimes have to duck under, and sometimes you find these like really, really wide pathways, but to get to it, you kind of have to squeeze in between buildings. So just walk around Venice. I mean, if you had only 3 hours to see Venice, just do that. Like I said, I really liked Venice, but the problem is that it's becoming less of a city and more of a tourist attraction. Only 60,000 people live there now, with 25% of those people being 65 or above, yet 20 million people visit it each year. I was in the off-season, but nevertheless, there was still a pretty good amount of people there, so I can't imagine during the summer months. And this whole thing of becoming like an adult Disneyland is kind of sad, because it takes away from the authenticity of your visiting. When you visit all those architectural monuments and you see all those masterpieces, you're witnessing the city. I generally like to see monuments of a city which still exists. Monuments not of an old city, but one which is old, yes, but is continuously growing. But unfortunately, it seems as though Venice's history has overtaken its present. You know, living in those old buildings very, very high up, where the cost of living is very high, because everything needs to ship from the mainland. Also, another problem, which isn't a real problem compared to what I just talked about, is that if you don't have your hotel room in Venice, it doesn't matter whether you live as close as you can on the mainland, it still takes an hour by bus or boat, or just boat, to get to St. Mark's Square. So yeah, Venice is just this really, really pretty city where you can walk the streets for hours and still get absolutely nowhere, with very, very pretty buildings with stuff that which they stole 800 years ago, still haven't given back. The Doge's Palace, the most complicated form of government ever made by man, and one that might not exist in 40 years because of global warming or decreasing population, or both. CatOwlFilms out.